Previously, I did an episode about ring psychology, focusing on the emotional motivations of what a wrestler's character is going through in the ring. However, unsurprisingly, psychology is a complicated issue, and just one episode isn't going to do, which is exactly why it's back as the topic of this episode. Because today, Dave knows ring psychology again. Thank you so much for the support over on Patreon, Jesus Ferro, as it really is coming in at a good time right now. Last time, I really focused on the regular psychology of a wrestler's character as he goes through a match, but now I want to dive a bit deeper into the ring part of ring psychology, as it is something that, like a lot of stuff, gets criticized for not being as present today as it should be. Now, what do I mean by all that? Well, I think it's important that we remember that professional wrestling is supposed to appear as wrestling, and that it is supposed to be represented as a legitimate contest, with all parties involved trying to win. So while all the character emotions and the ability to trigger emotions in the audience that we discussed last time are still every bit as valid, I really want to specify how there is one constant motivation that must persist in every single match: the need to win. This is the baseline emotion running through every single worthwhile bout, and if it's not there, then the match means nothing. Why bother having it? Why are we watching? And why should anybody care? Alright, so all this seems like common sense, so why am I drilling this so hard? Well, it's because when it comes to actual in-ring work, this mentality seems to be absent in many matches, when it should be the first and main through line in any match. For example, a common instance and a major gripe for me is not going for the cover when you should. Remember, if the goal is to win, then taking every opportunity to gain victory should be what you try to do whenever you can do it. If you just hit a superplex, for example, why would you do anything other than try and pin your opponent? If the rules of wrestling physics were legitimate and you just dropped someone from the top rope, and history has proven that that can put someone away, then why wouldn't you at least try to cover them? Now, I'm not going to get into the whole slew of behind-the-scenes benefits that multiple cover attempts do have for a wrestling match, but I will just maintain that for psychology purposes, a pin attempt is just a bare minimum. However, this isn't the only faux pas for ring psychology using this logic. Let's look at running. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a wrestler get put into a painful looking leg hold and then they sell it with a limp for a moment or two, but then they go and run the ropes or climb to the top rope, or they carry their opponent while standing solid on both feet? Although sometimes they will give the courtesy of limping a bit in between these spots. Now, it would be one thing if they were carrying their opponent on their shoulders and one leg would start to buckle, or if they screamed in pain while favoring their leg as they dragged themselves to the rope. But when do you ever really see that? And since we're talking about what a wrestler does after a leg hold, how does that leg hold get released to begin with? Well, let's just look at broken holds. A lot of times you see wrestlers letting go of their opponents apropos of nothing. So just think about it. If you have your opponent locked in your clutches and you are really trying to inflict pain and you want to get a victory, why would you ever let go of them unless you absolutely had to? Now look, it's different if they grab the ropes or they reverse it or something, but if you just let go and then the match continues, why did you even apply the hold in the first place? Now, we tend to see how this is supposed to go a lot in MMA. Once a fighter has a guy in a hold, they tend to hold on. Even if it's not the most aesthetically pleasing visual, they tend not to let go once they have it locked in. And look, I do know that rear chin holds and front face locks are not the most enthralling moves to be staring at for several minutes by pro wrestling standards, but nevertheless, you get my point. Oh, and on the reverse side of things, the person in the hold should be doing whatever they can to escape, as it does tend to irk some people when they see moves like the crippler crossface, where the person in the hold clearly has a free hand, and instead of punching the executor or trying to pry his tormentor's hands off, he just sticks it out there straight for the camera to see. Although I will admit I like the move anyway. Oh, and speaking of hands, let's not forget about punches, because I have another question for you. Barring anyone getting hit so hard that they immediately enter REM sleep while still standing, have you ever seen someone get punched in the face for real? What's the first thing that they do? Well, their first order of business is to say, forget everything else, I need to not get punched in the face again. And they cover up, they drop to the floor and get in the fetal position or whatever. The point is that their internal thinking is to protect themselves, because getting punched in the face hurts as much as getting punched in the face. However, the unfortunate part of all this is that when it comes to pro wrestling, people get punched all the time, and they just eat it as if it was a series of marshmallows being thrown at their head, which really does make me miss the old English rules that ban punches. Anyway, this is just yet another example of natural, normal defense psychology for the human mind being completely overridden by kayfabe reasoning, and this all goes to breaking the illusion that this is a legitimate contest and it makes things look phony, which is never supposed to happen. Now granted, there is still one safety net here, because sometimes good commentary can rescue any and all of these lapses in logic by attempting to justify what we're seeing, almost as if the commentators were acting as an interior monologue for the wrestlers. They do this by saying things like, "Oh, he's not going for the cover right away because he wants to punish him, but he may regret that as this could be a mistake that might come back to bite him in the end." Or, "He let go of that hold because it clearly wasn't getting the job done, so he's gonna have to try something else." Or, "The adrenaline is running so high that they're gonna feel these hits later, but right now, they're just in it for the fight." Now sure, this is all a load of nonsense, but at least it's a nice attempt at rationalizing the missing psychology in the match. And sadly, even that doesn't get done by commentary all that often either anymore. But they also shouldn't have to be doing it in the first place, because it's the wrestlers themselves that should be using sound ring reasoning and remember the psychology of an actual fight. Although, let's just look at the silver lining. Good ring psychology is still possible, so let's just focus on the positives. Let's look at what makes in-ring logic look so great. For example, I've already talked about this in another previous episode, but it bears repeating, as one piece of ring psychology that still gets used fairly well even today is creating separation. Because if two wrestlers were really trying to beat each other, then they would be making almost constant contact, wouldn't they? However, creating separation is useful for a number of reasons, and it'll happen often in a match. The trick isn't giving solid justification for it, which many wrestlers still do. In fact, this is something that I think strikes can be very effective at, and they occasionally get used as such. If, let's say, you knee a guy in the face, it gives an excuse for him being knocked away, rationally giving some distance between the two of you. And there are other examples of things still being done right, don't get me wrong. Plenty of wrestlers still do things properly, and they still do their best at representing actual combat. But it should be everyone who steps into the squared circle that needs to remember that they're supposed to be making this contest look as legitimate as possible. Because if everyone is trying to win, then we all do, on a psychological level. Well, there you have it, another look at ring psychology and what makes it so important. But what are some other examples of it being done right in today's day and age, and what should we be seeing more of to improve it? Let me know down in the comments. And thank you to all my Patreon supporters, as it's really very important to me, especially right now. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, Dave knows.